Got it.
Wouldn't it be great if we all had relationship agreements? Life would be so much easier. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about relationships and specifically about how to kill a relationship in 30 days. So if you are here today and you're in a relationship and you don't know how to get out of it, then listen up, because I'm going to give you a few pointers right now. So we started this series a few weeks ago, and we said, if you want to kill your relationship, then don't communicate. Don't speak with one another, just let things go, or communicate in code so that the other person has to be a mind reader to figure you out. That'll kill your relationship. We said another way to kill your relationship would be to hold out for getting your way always. As long as you're not flexible and you stubbornly hold on to your ground as long as you can, you should be able to end your relationship in a short amount of time. Then we talked about killing your relationship by staying focused on what's wrong with the other person. If you can make them feel judged or less than you, then you should be able to get them out of the relationship over time. And finally, last week, we talked about as long as you don't commit to the relationship, then it should head for disaster at some point. So we've taught you well through this series of what not to do unless you really want to kill your relationship. So today we're wrapping up this series by looking at one more relationship killer. And this one is especially sad because rather than destroying a relationship quickly, it creates this slow bleed that drains and cripples and poisons the relationship over time. But it's just as deadly as the others. And you should probably know this relationship killer, it doesn't discriminate. Any relationship is fair game, whether it's a relationship with friends, spouses, co-workers, whether you're just dating, maybe your parents, or even your own children. If someone matters to you, this one can get you. So here's how it works. At some point in our lifetime, often it was from our past childhood, but it could be from a past relationship that we've had, we get imprinted with a feeling. This feeling, it gets tattooed on our heart. Most of us don't even realize it's been imprinted on us, and as we journey through life, it just becomes part of our DNA. And as we do life and we interact with other people, family members, co-workers, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, these feelings that have been imprinted on our heart, they resurface when we experience conflict. And these feelings are what we like to call fear buttons. The reason we call them fear buttons is because they are from a hurt, or they are a painful reminder of a past experience that we had that might have been unpleasant. Sometimes we don't even know where these feelings come from, but we do know that we don't like this icky kind of feeling that they create in us. So we avoid them. We stuff them. We put them away off to the side because we're afraid to feel that feeling. And when our fear button is pushed, it results in conflict because we've never dealt with the root, the cause of this feeling. And when our fear button is pushed, it can result in a variety of reactions. For most of us, though, the common reaction is anger. And here's the crazy thing. Anger is actually a secondary reaction to whatever the original feeling is. It's a secondary feeling. See, I remember when my wife and Amy and I were early in our relationship and in our marriage, and we were experiencing conflict. I had no idea what a feeling was. All I knew was anger. And I would get so frustrated that she just wasn't seeing my side of things, that after going round and round, I would finally erupt in anger. And when I erupted in anger, my voice would get loud because she was obviously hearing impaired because she wasn't hearing anything I was saying. I would stand up and I would pace back and forth, and I would get extremely animated. My hands would be going. I might even throw a roll of toilet paper or two. And actually, that was what our first major conflict was over. Watch a little bit of our story.
You know, I really tried to do everything totally different than what I'd done in my past. And just felt like it all was imploding. It just really felt like I tried hard. And so when none of that was working, it just kind of felt frustrated and just ready to give up.
I can remember coming home one day from work and sitting in the driveway and just crying. I mean, I sat out there for probably a half hour and just cried. I did not want to go into the house. And that's when it really hit me that I don't know what I'm going to do at this point. I mean, I'm married, we have a blended family, but it's just so dark and it's so hopeless to me that I just didn't want to go in the house. And I knew at that point we were in serious trouble.
I was angry at everyone, not just God, but I think I was angry at the kids because I felt like they had a part in it. Angry at Amy because I felt like we'd talked through a lot of this stuff before we really decided to get married.
We had a small group through our church. They saw the writing on the wall and they realized that if something didn't happen, we were going to end up divorced. So they actually approached us on going to NIM.
So that kind of tells you just a little bit of that journey. It really was around anger. And anger often causes us to react foolishly or without integrity. But anger can have different reactions. Lots of us have these different perceptions of what getting angry looks like. It could be sarcasm. It could be withdrawing or shutting down from the other person. It could be stonewalling or exhibiting just negative body language. But whatever it is, anger always involves a strong, uncomfortable response to this perceived provocation, this perceived hurt or threat that we've experienced at some point in our life. Dallas Willard describes anger like this: the primary function of anger in life is to alert me to an obstruction to my will and immediately raise alarm and resistance before I even have time to think about it. See, anger in itself isn't wrong, not any more than pain is wrong, right? It's just alerting you to something that is important to you. It's how we react to it once we've been alerted that matters. You see, conflict is inevitable. When two flawed individuals, when we try to walk together and do life together, someone is going to bump into the other person. And sometimes it's just a simple misunderstanding, and sometimes it's a much deeper and darker hurt or wound that is created. And I don't know if some of you can relate to this, but have you ever felt like when you get into an argument with someone or a conflict that you're in kind of a washing machine and you're just on the spin cycle and you're going round and round and round, and it feels like you've been there before and it's the same issue over and over and over again? Kind of remind you of that when you get into an argument sometimes? So we actually call that the fear cycle. It's because our fear buttons create that. See, when my fear button gets pushed, I then react poorly towards the other person, which often causes their fear button to get pushed, and then they react poorly, and then another one of my buttons gets pushed, and I react poorly, and we just do this dance, this round and round and round. It just goes on and on and on. It's so much wasted energy. And you know, the issue almost never gets resolved, right? That's why we keep ending up back in the same spot over and over again, to the point where then we decide we just want to avoid conflict altogether. And here's the reality. The closer you get to someone, the more opportunities you have for conflict to arise. And just like anger, conflict in and of itself isn't wrong, but when we choose to avoid conflict, that's when it becomes a relationship killer. When we choose to ignore conflict and act like it didn't happen, and act like it didn't hurt, and when we take that anger out and aim it at another person, it means we may never resolve the issue, because now we have broken a connection with that other person. And I want to stop here and make a real important disclaimer. Nobody can make you feel angry. So let me say that again. Nobody can make you feel angry. It's just like nobody can make you feel happy. If you don't want to laugh at my corny jokes, I can't make you do that. Just like I can't push your button, you can't push mine. We choose to be angry or happy. It's a choice. We allow our buttons to be pushed. I also want to say that there are certain kinds of conflict, sexual abuse, domestic and physical abuse, emotional abuse, that often need the intervention of law enforcement or trained professionals, because one of the parties no longer has the assurance of safety. So if you're in that type of a relationship or you have that type of conflict going on, we have fantastic restore classes here that can help you work through any of those issues, past issues, and we can also help to point you to professional help if you need that. But I want to share with you that the Bible actually teaches us how we're supposed to deal with conflict, whether it's a spouse, a friend, a coworker. Jesus sets it up and tells us how we deal with it. If you didn't know, though, the Bible is broken up into an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament of the Bible is about life on earth before Jesus comes, and the New Testament is about life on earth after Jesus comes. There are 66 separate books in the Bible with chapters and verses that are really eyewitness accounts of history. And lots of great teaching in there based on what's happened in our world. If you don't have a Bible, we have free, easy-to-read Bibles over here at the Connection Spot. You can grab one after service today, take it home, it's yours to keep. If you have our Gateway app, download it on your phone. There's a Bible link there that you can use. If you don't have a Bible today, not a big deal, because I'm going to put the verses up here on the screen. But if we start by looking in the New Testament of the Bible, in the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 15, Jesus tells us what to do if we have conflict with another person. He says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. So, what Jesus is doing here, he's making a point of urging us to approach conflict in a relationship in a one-on-one manner first. And it really makes sense when you think about why he would say to do that. You know, if you are unaware that we have had a conflict, and I come to you and say, look, this happened, and it really hurt, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because I feel like it's pushing me away from you. It's pushing us away from being engaged in relationship. I haven't talked to anyone else about this. I just wanted to come to you first. Now, compare that with this. Look, this happened and really hurt, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because I feel like it's pushing me away from you, away from us having a relationship. I complained to my wife, talked to my 2 coworkers, asked a couple of your friends why you're this way all the time, and even posted a rant on Facebook about it. So I finally needed to come to you directly. See the difference between the two? See, now you're not only having to process our conflict, but you're now going to have to work through what 6 other people and all their Facebook friends think about you. See, don't go to others first. Going privately and immediately to that other person diffuses a whole layer of defensiveness. That issue should be between just you and me. If going privately to those we have conflicts matters this much to Jesus, it has huge implications for what we will listen to from others about others. Have you ever been talking with a friend of yours or someone who just has the need to vent? And they want to talk about some conflict that's going on with them? And oftentimes, we become the unwitting accomplice of their story because we allow that relational damage to take place when someone talks to us about somebody else. See, and while it feels good to be somebody's friend and that we know that they can come and talk to, it isn't actually helping them. The best way we can help is by directing them to go talk to the person that they have the conflict with as soon as possible. And if they can't resolve it together, Jesus actually has some wisdom and tools and suggestions and some wise ways to draw other people in the rest of that Matthew 5 passage. But it always comes after trying to reconcile one-on-one first. So, where do we start and how do we do it? I want to give you 4 simple steps for this process. So one of the things that we talk about in relationships is not to focus on the other person, but to focus on what you want out of the relationship. See, it's not about changing the other person. It's not about getting your way. It's about asking myself, what do I want in a relationship with this other person? For example, do I want this other person to accept me? Do I want this other person to offer me approval? Do I want to feel important to this other person or that I matter? Do I want to feel like we're on a team, like we're in it together? Do I maybe want to feel, especially if it's from a spouse or significant other, that they love me, that I'm loved and valued by them? There's all kinds of different feelings for that want. What are we wanting from it? See, and once I know what I want from the relationship, not from the person, but the relationship, I can begin to approach the conversation with integrity. And my reactions can be with honor because I'm keeping what I want at the focus. See, and I know at that point that if I react poorly, I won't get my want. I know that if I react in anger, it's going to shut down getting what I want out of the relationship. So step 2 is to spend some time with my fear button. I have to get to know it. If I keep running into this situation over and over and over again about conflict, I need to understand what I'm feeling and where it's coming from. And the only way to get to know someone or something is to spend time with it. Also, when you do that, you can create space between your button getting pushed and your reaction. So first I have to be aware that I have this button going on, something internal. And it may take a long time to figure out what it is, where it comes from. For me, one of mine is not good enough. And I now can remember when I was a kid that I felt not good enough in a situation. And when I start feeling that again, I'm able to tune in to my button. So one of the things that you have to do, though, is allow yourself to experience that icky feeling. It's not fun. But we don't want to avoid it or try to stuff it back down. We have to let that feeling come to the surface so that we can get to know it. And if you struggle with that, you need to ask God to join you in the process of allowing yourself to deal with it. And one of the ways then you can start figuring it out is to start asking yourself questions like, what am I feeling right now? Have I felt this feeling before? When did I feel this feeling before? Am I turning up the volume on this feeling? Am I making it a bigger deal than what it really is? What is the truth about this feeling? Am I really not good enough? No, right? So I need to discover that. And then what do I want right now? I want a better relationship. Then once I've kind of spent some time figuring that out, step 3 is to address it quickly. So I want to address this conflict that's rising up quickly. I don't want to let it just go and go and go. You ever heard the saying of, if we can address it now, it's a shrub. If we let it go, it becomes a tree. Well, trees are a lot harder to take down than shrubs are. So we have to address the conflict quickly. Ask the other person if they're available to talk. But don't just bull your way in, because some people need to mentally and emotionally prepare for a conversation. So set an agreeable time to meet, but don't delay. Don't say, I'm going to avoid this conversation, so yeah, I'll be glad to meet with you June of 2019. Maybe it's a day, 24 to 48 hours. Look what Jesus says about that in the New Testament book of Matthew chapter 5. He says, so if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. See, this passage says that when dealing with conflict, there is a clear emphasis on urgency. Move toward it. Go. Don't let it linger. Conflict avoidance is not what the Bible teaches. There's a clear mandate in the Bible all throughout to go and address it. However, how we address it is what matters. Poorly handled conflict is the cause of so much misery and damage in our broken world. But handled properly, conflict can actually pull us closer together and create closer ties with one another. So how we approach it makes a massive difference. In order for us to move forward, we have to acknowledge the conflict and work to prioritize our relationship over the hurt that we're feeling. So if you don't go with the intention of restoring the relationship, it's really easy to get baited or pulled back into arguments and being offended and trying to defend yourself, which further damages the relationship. So resist the temptation to just go to blow. Don't go to just blow up on somebody. Sometimes we seek out the other person who hurt us with the intention to hurt them back. We feel justified in venting our anger on them. But that is not how relationships get restored. We can and must be authentic with how we feel and what happened, but authenticity can easily drift into hostility. We need to be honest, but we never have to be disrespectful. So lead with your feelings. This is step 4. That's different from leading with what they've done. So step 4 is to lead with your feelings using I feel or I felt statements. For instance, when people criticize me, I feel like I'm a failure. Try not to use accusatory statements like, you always make me mad, when you never compliment me. Stick to your feelings. That brings it back to what you want out of the relationship. Saying something like this, when I'm criticized, I feel like a failure, and it keeps me from feeling like we are in a partnership together. Always be truthful and disclose it all. Sometimes we like to hold back, but if we hold something back, we can't fix the whole problem. And a hidden problem can't be reconciled. Just like hidden cancer can't be cured until it's uncovered and out in the open.
You know, the thing that NIM showed me was feelings. To have feelings other than anger is like a sign of weakness, you know, and so never being explained what that was, what feelings are. You know, everything came out, every hurt, everything came out in anger or frustration.
Some of the tools were very effective because it helped me to understand myself better. It wasn't just because we had a bad marriage that I was the way I was. It was because of years of insecurities and fears. And so to be able to learn what they were, why I reacted the way I did, and how to change that, it was really an eye-opener for me, and it gave me a lot of hope.
You know, as our relationship got better, our relationship with our kids got better, things just, you know, life was just good, but yet felt like we were just still missing something.
We just both were kind of at that place where we wanted to see God, we wanted to feel God more. And so we started with a Thanksgiving meal, and as a result of that, God led us to the next step, which was starting food outreach, which is called Jesus Who's Homeless. And now we go as a couple and as a community into the weekly and extended stay motels here in Branson, and we pass out meals to people that are in poverty.
I have a life partner, what we call a running partner to do life with. And where I'm at today is a direct result of my relationship with my wife and my relationship with God. She is my encourager. She is my best friend. We could not do the ministry that we've done without one another.
It's just a friendship and a relationship that is like no other. You know, you don't have to go through life just enduring. You know, it can be so much better than that. And now actually we get to teach NIM workshops with the people that we serve. So it's pretty amazing.
I always find that a little cheesy at the end, but you know, if we had avoided the conflict, maybe none of this would be here, right? And so don't avoid conflict. And resolving conflict, it can be awkward and uncomfortable, but for there to be reconciliation, we'll have to be uncomfortable. You know, if God would offer his son Jesus to die on a cross to bring us life and freedom from our past and our present and our future mistakes and wrongs, and Jesus would willingly go to that cross and be uncomfortable, then we should be able to be uncomfortable to restore relationships with one another. And when we do that, that's how we can love everyone life by life. And that's what we're going to be celebrating next week, is how over the past 20 years, 6 years here in Branson, Gateway Church has been loving people life by life. But to be able to do that, it comes down to trust. And are we going to trust Jesus with the outcome? And if you're ready to fully trust Jesus with your will and your life, and you want to live in the freedom that only Jesus offers, we mark that moment publicly with baptism. Baptism's an outward expression of an inward change that has already taken place in you. The Bible talks about counting the cost of following Jesus. See, and when you choose Jesus to be your forgiver and leader of your life, you're entering into this spiritual battle. And this battle may cost you friends, relationships, jobs, or even more. And so you have to ask yourself, are you willing to trust in Jesus over everything else? And if so, and you've never done this before, today is the day to mark that publicly. See, baptism is a public testimony for people who have moved from living life for themselves to living life following Jesus and doing his will and ways. And nobody should be baptized unless they've made this decision to identify with Jesus and to trust him with their life. So if you're not there today, that's fine. Just keep coming back and exploring and discovering who Jesus is and what he has in store for you. And we don't rebaptize people either. If you've been baptized and you truly accepted Jesus as your forgiver and the leader of your life, you don't need to be baptized just because you've messed up. That's what grace and forgiveness is all about. I constantly mess up. And when I do, I just stop and I ask for forgiveness. I turn away from the behavior, the mistakes that I'm making, and turn back to Jesus. I don't have to be rebaptized for that. Because see, when you accept Jesus for the very first time, all of your wrongs, your past, your present, and your future, they've already been forgiven when you ask Jesus into your heart the very first time. And baptism, it can't give you anything spiritually speaking. It's just water. It just signifies something that has already happened in you. Going under the water symbolizes your old life being buried with Christ. This is the forgiveness that comes through Jesus dying on the cross for us, for our past, present, and future wrongs. And then coming up out of the water symbolizes your new life with Jesus. And this new life that you get through God's power, his Holy Spirit, they call it. It's the same power and spirit that actually raised Jesus from the dead. You see, when you fully realize what Jesus has done for you, you get excited to celebrate that. And when someone comes up out of the water here, we celebrate it. We cheer, we shoot off confetti, people make noise, we have poppers, all kinds of stuff. And the reason we do that is because we figure if heaven is celebrating, we should be too. We take baptism seriously, and Jesus spoke these words about baptism in the New Testament book of Luke, chapter 15, verse 7, he says, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. And remember, repentance just means to turn away from the things that you no longer want to do with God's help. And start doing the things that please God and the things that help you live a better life. So for some of you today is the day to go public with your faith. But again, if you're just starting to explore faith, keep exploring. But maybe somebody here is feeling God prompting them. Today, I do believe. And I want what Jesus can do in my life and in my relationships. So don't let any excuses get in the way. Excuses like, I will do it next time when my friends come or when I get my act together. No, it's not about how good or bad you are. It's about trusting in Jesus. See, don't say, I'll do it when I get my life changed. Because here's the deal. You can't change your life on your own. Let God begin to do the changing in you. And baptism is just the first step in that process. So, questions for you today that you need to answer is, will you accept God's love and forgiveness through Jesus? And if so, will you love God publicly by identifying with his death and resurrection? And that he did that so that you could have life and freedom. That's the only questions you really need to answer. And if you say yes to that, don't wait. And I know it's crazy. We say it every time. You may go home in wet clothes. You may not have thought about coming here and getting baptized. But we give you your own towel. You take it with you. And I guarantee you will never forget it. The band's going to come back up here and they're going to sing some songs to God and for God and about God. You can sit, you can stand. We'll put the words up here on the screen so that you can sing along. And as you listen to this first song, though, think about your willingness to trust Jesus. We don't pass an offering bucket here. This is just our gift to you. If Gateway is your church home, we give out of the gratitude of all that Jesus has done for us so that we can help others. So we have buckets set up in the back and giving stations. You can also go online. You can set up a recurring gift if you wanted to. If you want someone to pray for you, maybe today's the first day you're making this decision to follow Jesus. We've got people over here on the right and left by the front that'll love to pray with you and answer any questions around baptism. But while the band plays, maybe you're in a relationship that you need to get reconciled. Maybe you're in a difficult relationship that needs some healing. So pray about your buttons. Where do they come from? And let God begin to restore and heal your relationships.